When we're living life, every single one of us is going to go through moments of pain, either physical pain or emotional pain. And so to live life, pain seems to be this important aspect, right? It's there for us all. The question that comes through that realization is, what is the purpose of pain? Why is it there? How does it help us? And how can we use that knowledge to live life more? So that's what I want to explore today. So to begin with, let's look at why pain is there. I want to use an analogy here that helps us to better understand the purpose of pain. In life, we're going to go through challenges. We're going to go through stresses. And we need feedback on when there's too much and when there's not enough. We can all handle stress, we can all handle challenge, and we might liken that to being like a glass. We can hold a glass worth of stress and challenges. And if we imagine that we've got a glass within each of us, any stress that comes in fills up this glass. And there's three main taps that pour into this glass that represent stress in our life. There are the stressors, the physical stressors. There are the nutritional stressors, and there are the emotional stressors. There are other stressors, of course, but let's simplify it with just those three for today. Anytime we feel stress or we endure stressors or experience stressors in one of these three realms, water is going to pour into that glass. Stress is going to pour into that glass. Now, the good thing is there's a small hole at the bottom, so anything that goes in will eventually get processed through it and come out, making us more resilient and better for the experience. And you know that, right? You've all had stressors and, pains and things like that, where you look back and you're like, actually I learned loads from that, and actually it made me more resilient and stronger and better able to do what I'm here to do once the pain has been processed, obviously. So what's happening here is that we're getting this glass filled up, and if the glass, the stress pouring into the glass is going faster than what is getting processed out the other end, drained out the other end, then things are going to overflow. And that is going to start to create symptoms or alarm bells in our body to let us know we need to stop and make a change here. That there's too much stress, there's too much challenge going on, and that we're off track. And pain is one of the main feedback loops, feedback systems or alarm bells that our mind and body use to let us know that that's happening. So pain is an ally. Pain is a friend to let us know when the stresses of our life are out of balance and are too much, and when we need to stop and make a change. It's a feedback to let us know when we're not being authentic, when we're not being who we are, when we're maybe in relationships that are not aligned with us, or we're putting too much investment into things that we can't control, like the news or whatever. It's feedback to say there's certain movements that are not going right, or we're not doing enough movement. It's feedback to say our diet's off, or etc. So it could be any one of these feedbacks that will create a stress on us, and our body's going to have to let us know that there is a problem that we need to stop and change, do something about. Now, in realizing that pain is an ally, that pain is a pal, we can look at where most of us are going wrong when pain happens. The modern day approach to pain is to suppress it, is to switch it off through the use of medications. Now, that's the typical modern approach, and there is huge value in that approach. I mean, if I've got extreme amounts of pain, like I've got tooth pain, I'm going to be taking some meds, okay? But it doesn't change the fact that the cause of the pain still needs to be listened to. I need to go to the dentist, I've maybe got a tooth infection, as an example. Far too often what happens is we get pain and we start to pop the pills. And we start to use them as a way to suppress the pain. And therefore we can't hear what the call is. Now, I'd liken pain to being like a bit of a guard dog at the gates of a castle that we are privileged to be the king or queen of, right? Without making us sound too magnanimous. We are the king and queen, if you like, of our own castle, of our mind and body, right? And there's a guard dog at the gate that barks that creates pain, if you like, to let us know when there's a threat and when the castle grounds are under threat. So taking something to putting a muzzle on that dog is not going to be helpful for us to know what the threat is, what the cause of that bark is. And therefore, we're going to be less informed to do something about it. And that is a problem. And that's what far too many people will do when they experience pain. They'll see it as an enemy to attack. They'll see it as the enemy at the gate to switch off. And whilst pain is an unpleasant experience, and that can seem understandable why we fall into that trap, it's not based on the truth of what pain is there to do for us. The pain is there to help us to stop, to listen, and to work out what to do, what change needs to occur, where the stressors are coming in that are out of balance. So it might not just be the use of medications that people use. It's not just that. It's maybe other drugs or alcohol or sex or porn or other pleasures that people may get in life that they'll use to nullify the pain. I'll give you a personal experience of this. I developed chronic pain 7 years ago, and I was on the sofa. I had a 1-year-old boy, and I was working late into the hours on my laptop. My wife went off to bed. I get up, go up to bed at about 10 o'clock at night when I feel I've done as much as I can do, and my whole body went into spasm. It was this intense explosion of pain, particularly in my chest. I couldn't move. And then eventually found myself crawling up the stairs. My wife comes out thinking, what the heck's going on? At this point I'm like screaming in pain. Get into bed, surrounded by pillows to keep me fixed in one position so that I can't move because the movement was creating the pain. And wake up the next morning after eventually falling asleep, feeling better, but left with this kind of chest pain. So not the big spasm or anything like that. Can move about now, but chest pain, rib pain. And that pain did not go. In a week, a month, a year, still there. And I started to apply my knowledge. I help a lot of people with pain, physical and mental pain, as a chiropractor and a coach over the years. And I am resourced in these areas to know what to do usually and to help people overcome their problems. But there I was in chronic pain now, unable to overcome it with the treatments that I was going for, with all the things that I was doing to try and help myself, and I just could not overcome it. But the worst pain of all was that. It wasn't the pain itself that was the biggest problem for me. It was I could manage that. The biggest pain was not being able to overcome it and not knowing why it was there in the first place. And so I started to do things like, eat better, do certain exercises, meditate more, do more yoga, like this type of stuff. And nothing was touching it. Nothing was getting me better. And as a result, that was creating more and more emotional pain, frustration, anger, etc. Until in the end, and this went on for 3 years. In the end, I eventually came to the realization that I might have been doing the right things on paper, but I was not asking the right question as to why was my pain there. I didn't really know how to do that, actually, not properly. And it was something that Dr. Joe Dispenza said. Dr. Joe Dispenza, I heard him say, you can do all the right things. You can eat your organic food, you can do your yoga, your meditation, all this stuff that I was doing. But if the dominant energy that your cells are bathed in every single day is one of fear or anger or grief, then that isn't going to touch the surface. In other words, it's going to slow the taps down maybe a bit, but there's going to be so much overwhelm of stress pouring into that glass, it's always going to overflow. And that got me really reflecting and going, my dominant energy is fear, anger, resentment, grief. And the reason for that is because I'd gone through huge trauma that I hadn't dealt with. The near loss of my wife and son during the birth. And when I looked up PTSD, I realized I had all the hallmarks of it. I ticked basically every single box. And I started to realize that this was probably the cause of my pain. And so I went to a trauma counselor and I started to work through this. And on top of the other bits I was doing to try and help myself, slowly but surely started to gain clarity around what my pain was trying to tell me, how to figure that out, and how to honor it. And in a nutshell, go from hating my pain and seeing it as an enemy at the gate that was there to be destroyed and fixed, dealt with, and overcome, seeing it as a friend that was just trying to communicate a loving message that would help me to live more. And that was, you've been through a lot, mate, and you need to deal with this. And that is really what the pain was there to teach me. And so I no longer have that pain. But that was about 3 years of my life, every single day in pain. More so emotionally than physically. So, am I a human being? Do I still get pain now? Of course I do. But I bring this, what I'm going to recommend you do, this type of questioning, this type of love to the table, in order to figure out what it's trying to say, rather than just try and pan it off with medications like, happened to me, and not really listen to what it's trying to say. So here's some suggestions I'd recommend. Obviously, the main thing is recognize that pain is your pal. If you're in pain or you get pain in the future, because it's part of life, you have to bring love to the table. You don't have to like your pain, but you have to bring love to it, to be able to care for it enough to listen to what it's trying to say. If you bring your judgment, you ain't going to really listen. You're like, oh, whatever, yeah. You're not really going to listen, like I wasn't. So bring love to the table. And one tip I'd recommend you do is close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, and ask the question, what is my pain trying to tell me? What is the message behind my pain? And wait till you hear an answer. Don't try and analyze it. Just wait till you hear an answer. And more often than not, you'll get one. And it's not always what we think. It's not always I'm just lazy, or I'm just weak and pathetic, or I'm just not eating well, or it's not always what we think it's going to be. Sometimes it's, I'm in the wrong job. Sometimes it's, I'm not listening to my heart. Sometimes it's, I'm letting people overpower me and I'm not standing up for what I believe in life. There's so many different things it can be. We're all different people. We all have different values. The answers are not always the same. But how are you going to know the answers if you don't ask? So ask that question. And sometimes the answer will be, I don't know. And that's your green light to find people that do. Whether it's therapists, whether it's counselors, whether it's, whatever it is. There's so many, great people out there. But find somebody that looks at health in this way, that looks at pain in this way, that looks at it as a messenger that is there to try and help you in life and trying to help you to be more of who you are. Those people are worth their weight in gold. Another thing you can do, if you're not aware of what the cause of your pain is, for example, or what it's trying to tell you, is just simply find the value in it being there. What is it teaching you right now? What value is it bringing to your life? If you only see the things that it's preventing, then you're only going to see it as this enemy to attack. But if you can see right now the value it's bringing to your life, what you're learning, what it's helping you to see and understand and tweak and change, what practitioners it's bringing to you and what you're learning from them, for example, that helps you to really see, and make friends with it, which makes you better able to bring love to it, to hear what it's trying to say. And, if you need any validation that the truth is that your pain is your pal and not your enemy, look at past experiences when you've been in pain, when you've kind of overcome pain, whether it was physical or mental. What did it teach you then? When we look back, we can see how it made us better in some way, shape, or form. So do that if you need any convincing that pain helps you to learn. And actually, if you look back at any pain and you can't see any value in it, that's a sign that you're not properly healed from it. Again, obviously, don't do it on your own. Seek support when you need. I'm going to leave you with this, which is, there is a quote from an old mentor of mine, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I was fortunate enough to go and see live down in London many, many years ago with my dad. And he said this: pain is a symptom that you aren't living in harmony, and you should be dealing with the symptom not as a problem, but as a message that says, do something else. Pain is part of your life. It's there to keep you authentic, to keep you aligned with who you are, so that you can live life more fully, so that you can survive and thrive. Pain is your pal. Bring love to it, listen to what it's got to say, and you'll live life more.